I touched the antique porcelain clock on the mantelpiece, brushing off invisible dust. It ran flawlessly. Accuracy had always been my thing. Montgomery called it a cute quirk, but after 47 years of marriage, even quirks become common. 5 years ago, he was gone, and I continued to watch the clock with the same methodical precision. My house in Princeton held the quietness that is characteristic of places where the elderly live alone. 3 bedrooms, an office, a high-ceilinged living room, too much space for one woman of 72. But to sell it would mean parting with the last tangible memory of our lives. The window overlooked the neat lawn and the old maples that Montgomery and I had planted when we first moved here. Back then, I was a promising young literature teacher, and he was a brilliant mathematician. Both of us built good careers at Princeton University. I had risen to a professor specializing in 19th century English literature, and Montgomery had headed the math department for almost 15 years. I corrected the photograph on the mantel, the only one of the three of us: me, Montgomery, and our daughter Enid. The picture was taken when she was about 10 years old. She already had that stubborn crease between her eyebrows that she inherited from me. Maybe that's why we never really got along. The phone rang, breaking the silence of the house. I looked at the screen. Enid's number. As usual, I had mixed feelings: mild irritation and what psychologists would probably call maternal hope. Yes, Enid, I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. Mom, I just wanted to clarify, when are you coming back from Italy? Her voice sounded a little strained. 2 weeks after I leave, the 22nd. I emailed you the dates a month ago. I know, I just wanted to double check. Thornton wants to visit you after you get back. I smiled involuntarily. My grandson, the only person in this family with whom I'd developed a truly warm relationship. He was more sensitive in his 21 years than his mother had been in her 45 years of life. Tell him he's always welcome, I said, softening. How are his studies going? Good. He's in his 3rd year. Enid's voice was warm, as it always was when she talked about her son. He could graduate with honors if he kept his mind on his music. I bit my tongue. Here she goes again. Thornton had a fine ear for music and played in the university jazz ensemble. Enid thought it was a waste of time. That was the thing about Enid, always knowing what was best for others. Music isn't just an endeavor, Enid, I said. For some people, it's a way of expressing themselves. Mom, don't start. Her voice was cold again. Thornton is getting a degree in bioengineering at Princeton. It's no joke. He has a serious career ahead of him. I took a deep breath. It was always like this. A brief conversation and we were on the verge of an argument. Over the years, I'd learned to back off. Of course, I agreed. But small hobbies can make life richer. All in good time, Enid said. We were silent. I looked at the old photograph and thought about when exactly our relationship had gone downhill. Maybe when Enid was a teenager, or before. Or maybe they'd never been particularly good. How's Whitney, by the way? I asked, changing the subject. Whitney Preston, Enid's husband, worked for the same pharmaceutical company as she did. They'd met at a corporate event 15 years ago. He was 5 years younger than her, which bothered me at first, but over time I recognized that he'd proven to be a reliable partner. It's okay, works hard, she answered mechanically. And his mother? How is Sybil? Mother, since when are you interested in your mother-in-law's health? Just making conversation, Enid. I felt my irritation rising. She's fine. She just got back from a cruise. That's fine, I said, though I didn't really care what Sybil Preston was doing. The woman was pompous and considered herself an aristocrat, even though her husband had only been a successful real estate investor in the 80s. I have to go, Enid said. I have a meeting in 15 minutes. Of course, I said. Goodbye, Enid. She hung up without even saying goodbye. Typical. I went back to preparing for my trip: Italy, Florence, Rome, Venice. An itinerary that Montgomery and I had dreamed of our whole lives, but kept putting off first because of work, then because of his illness. Now I was going to fulfill that dream alone. I opened my closet and started pulling out things for the trip. A few light blouses, comfortable pants, a cardigan for cooler evenings. I packed a new pair of orthopedic shoes. Age takes its toll, especially when you plan to do a lot of walking through museums and ancient streets. Everything was carefully selected and practical. I've never been a spender, even when funds allowed. I had been saving money for the trip for the last 3 years. Of course, a literature professor's pension wasn't fabulous, but thanks to Montgomery's wise investments and no habit of living beyond my means, I could afford the trip. I had bought the tickets 2 months ago, booked small but cozy hotels in each city. Everything was ready. I picked up my Italy guidebook and sat in a chair by the window. Looking at pictures of the Sistine Chapel, I remembered how Montgomery, being a mathematician to the core, had admired Michelangelo's proportions. Divine math, he used to say. I smiled at that memory. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my reverie. On the threshold stood Thornton, a tall young man with attentive gray eyes, the Montgomery eyes. "Grandmother!" He hugged me with genuine warmth. "I thought I'd drop in before you left." "Thornton, what a pleasant surprise." I let him in. "Would you like some tea?" "Let me make it myself," he offered, heading into the kitchen. "Have you packed already?" "Almost everything is ready," I answered, following him. "The flight leaves in 3 days." Thornton put the kettle on and pulled cups from the cupboard. He knew my house like the back of his hand. "I'm so happy for you, Grandma. Grandpa would be happy that you're finally making this trip." "Yes, I think he would be." I sat down at the kitchen table. "How are you doing at the university?" Thornton perked up. "Great! We have an amazing bioengineering project going on right now. We're working on perfecting a technique for tissue culturing. It could have big implications for transplantology." That sounds impressive. I was really proud of him. "And we have a concert with a jazz band coming up," he added, placing a cup of tea in front of me. "It's a shame you'll miss it because of the trip." "There will be more concerts." I sipped my tea. "Your mother called today." Thornton's face tensed slightly. "And what did she want?" "She wanted to know when I'd be back. Said you wanted to visit me." "Yes, of course I do." He paused. "Grandmother, has she said anything strange lately? About you? About the house?" I looked up warily. "No, what is it?" He shook his head. "Nothing, just she and Dad have been whispering a lot lately, and I heard them discussing something about real estate appraisals." "Thornton," I put my hand over his, "don't worry. Your mother always wanted me to sell the house and move somewhere age-appropriate, as she puts it. But this house belongs to me, and I alone decide its fate." Thornton didn't look quite convinced, but nodded. "Of course, Grandmother. Just be careful, okay?" We finished our tea, talking about more pleasant things. The music Montgomery loved, the books Thornton had recently read on my recommendation, the places in Italy I planned to visit. As he left, he gave me a big hug and said, "Enjoy every moment in Italy, Grandma. You deserve it." His words warmed my heart, but a warning lingered. What was Enid up to? I turned back to the window and watched Thornton's car disappear around the corner. Youth was leaving me alone with old age and suspicion. In the evening, I went through the paperwork for the trip. Passport, health insurance, printouts of hotel reservations. I'd always preferred to have paper copies, not trusting electronic devices completely. Another quirk that annoyed Enid but amused Montgomery. My gaze fell on her husband's portrait on the wall. "What would you say, Monty?" I mentally asked. He'd always been gentler with Enid than I was. Perhaps that was the problem. We'd never been a united front in her upbringing. I demanded discipline and responsibility. He gave unconditional love and forgiveness. I sighed. Family bonding is a complex matter. It grows stronger or thinner over the years, but it never completely disappears. Even when Enid and I barely spoke, she was still my daughter, and I was still her mother. That bond couldn't be broken, no matter how much we sometimes wished it could. I closed my suitcase and looked at the clock. It was 9 o'clock at night. In 3 days, I'll be on a plane flying to my long-held dream. Whatever Enid was up to, it could wait until my return. The morning before I left was surprisingly clear for Princeton at this time of year. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, illuminating the stacks of books on the bedside table, the guidebooks to Italy, and the volume of Dante I decided to reread during the trip. I had learned Italian when I was young, hoping to someday read the Divine Comedy in the original. Now it seemed almost impossible. My eyesight wasn't what it used to be, and I had forgotten the language without practice. I opened an old photo album in a worn leather binding. The first pages showed Montgomery and me, young, smiling, on the steps of the university library. Me in a strict tweed suit, him in a plaid shirt and his perpetually disheveled hair. Intellectuals in love, full of ambition and hope. Turn the page, our wedding, a modest ceremony in the university chapel, only 20 guests. My parents looked with some bewilderment at the skinny mathematician I had chosen over more suitable candidates. But they didn't know Montgomery the way I did. His brilliant mind, quiet devotion, and unexpected sense of humor, which only manifested itself in the inner circle. A few pages later, the first photos with Enid. I'm in a hospital room, exhausted after 18 hours of labor, but happy. Montgomery holds the tiny bundle with such reverence as if it were the greatest mathematical discovery of the century. In a sense, it probably was the miracle of new life emerging, the result of a complex biological equation. Enid grew up a serious child. She learned to read early and showed a remarkable aptitude for the exact sciences. Just like her father, everyone said. But she didn't have his softness, his ability to find beauty in abstract concepts. She was pragmatic, driven more like my mother than either of us. I flipped through the pages of her life. Enid in her school uniform, Enid winning an award at the Science Olympiad, Enid going to university. With each picture, the distance between us seemed to grow. When exactly did we become strangers to each other? Maybe when I returned to teaching after maternity leave? Or when I refused to move closer to her first job in Boston? Or maybe it was my demanding nature, my inability to express unconditional love the way Montgomery did. The last pages of the album are of Enid and Whitney's wedding. She's in an elegant flouncy dress instead of the traditional bouffant gown. A pragmatic choice. Such a dress can be worn after the wedding. Whitney next to her is 5 years younger, but already with bald spots and a serious look. In the background, Montgomery and I are graying but still holding hands. Then pictures with Thornton, the only grandson. Montgomery is holding him in his arms, showing him some kind of book. The boy looks at his grandfather with an adoration I understood so well. The next picture is of me reading The Hobbit to Thornton. He is about 7 years old. These moments were among the happiest of my life. The last pictures with Montgomery were taken shortly before his illness. We're in the backyard celebrating his 70th birthday. He still looks full of vigor, though the doctors said later that the cancer had already begun its destructive work. I closed the album, feeling a lump come up to my throat. 5 years had passed and the pain of loss was still fresh. I didn't want to start the journey with a heavy heart. The phone rang as I was putting the last of my things in my suitcase. "Mom, it's me." Enid's voice sounded unusually soft. "I've been thinking about your trip. I want to offer to drive you to the airport tomorrow." I hesitated. Enid didn't usually take this kind of initiative. "I was going to call a cab," I answered cautiously. "Don't be silly." She sounded impatient, but she quickly pulled herself together. "Why pay the extra money? Besides, it's on my way. We have a meeting near the airport." It sounded reasonable, though a little suspicious. On the other hand, maybe Thornton had talked to her and she'd decided to patch things up. "Okay, thanks," I agreed. "The flight's at 11 in the morning, so we have to leave at 7 o'clock, she interrupted. "I know, Mom. You always get to the airport 3 hours in advance. I'll be at your place at 7 sharp. She disconnected without waiting for my answer. I stared at the phone with slight concern. Something was wrong here. After lunch, I decided to go out for a walk and stop by the Little Italy Cafe, as a symbolic beginning of my journey. It was a cozy little place 2 blocks from my house that served decent espresso and cannoli, quite tolerable for the American countryside. To my surprise, I met Beatrice Caldwell, my former faculty colleague and perhaps the only person at Princeton I could call a real friend. Beatrice taught art history and was one of the few people who had visited me since Montgomery's death, not out of politeness, but out of genuine affection. "Catherine!" She waved at me from the corner table. "Come here. I was just thinking of you." Beatrice was about 10 years younger than me, but she had already retired because of heart trouble. Nevertheless, she retained a vivacity of mind and an inexhaustible interest in life that made her company particularly enjoyable. "Ready for your Italian adventure?" she asked when I sat down across from her. "As ready as a woman of my age can be for an adventure," I grinned. "Just as long as my knees don't fail me in all those museums." "Nonsense," said Beatrice. You're stronger than many 40-year-olds. Do you remember how we climbed St. Peter's 5 years ago when we went to a conference in Boston? You beat me by a good 2 flights. I smiled, remembering that day. It had been shortly after Montgomery's death, and the trip had been a kind of therapy for me. We ordered coffee, and Beatrice looked at me carefully. Something's troubling you, Catherine. I can see it in your eyes. Enid offered to drive me to the airport tomorrow, I said. That's unusual. Beatrice frowned. Really strange, especially since I saw her the day before yesterday outside your house with a man. They stood on the sidewalk for quite a while, looking at the facade. What? I felt my insides tense up. Are you sure it was Enid? Positive. I even wanted to go over to say hello, but they looked like they were having an important conversation. The man was in a business suit, leather briefcase. He was writing something down. Do you think it could have been a real estate agent? I asked, remembering Thornton's words about talking about real estate appraisals. It's possible. Beatrice lowered her voice. You know, Catherine, I do not want to scare you, but my sister experienced something similar with her son last year. He suddenly became very caring, offered to help with everything, and then it turned out that he had already arranged to sell her house and a place in a nursing home without saying a word. I felt the blood drain from my face. Enid would never? Of course, Beatrice agreed quickly, though her eyes said otherwise. I'm sure there's some innocent explanation, but be careful, okay? And keep the deeds to the house in a safe place. We changed the subject, discussing the places I planned to visit in Italy. Beatrice, as an art historian, gave me some valuable advice about obscure but fascinating museums. But anxiety had already settled inside me, poisoning the anticipation of the trip. When I returned home, the first thing I did was check the safe in the study. The deeds to the house were in place, as was the will Montgomery and I had made years ago, leaving everything equally to Enid and Thornton. No sign that anyone had tried to get them. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Perhaps Enid just decided to be an attentive daughter before my long-awaited trip. But then why bring a real estate agent to the house? I decided to call Thornton, but then I changed my mind. I didn't want to put him in an awkward position between me and his mother. In the evening, I checked all my travel arrangements again. The tickets, passport, insurance, and the euros I'd exchanged at the bank beforehand were all in place. I'd set aside some cash for a cab in case Enid's plans changed suddenly. As I got older, I learned to always have a backup plan. In the morning, I woke up long before my alarm clock. Anxious thoughts kept me awake. I showered, dressed in a comfortable pantsuit perfect for a long flight, and went downstairs to make myself one last American breakfast before Italian croissants and cappuccino. At exactly 7, the doorbell rang. Enid stood on the doorstep, impeccably dressed in a business suit with perfect hair. Not a hair out of place in the tight bundle so different from her father's disheveled hair. Good morning, Mom. She smiled, and I was surprised to note that the smile reached her eyes, a rare occurrence in our relationship in recent years. Ready for your Italian adventure? The same words that Beatrice had said yesterday, but somehow they sounded fake in Enid's mouth. Yes, the suitcase is in the hallway. I pointed to a neat, medium-sized blue suitcase. Great. Enid picked it up with unexpected ease. Your luggage is very compact, Mom. Most women your age take half their closet with them. I've never understood that habit, I replied as I closed the house. Traveling is about experiences, not outfits. Enid nodded, as if in agreement, though she'd never shared my asceticism. The car, a new silver Lexus, was in perfect order. Not a speck of dust, not a single extra item. Enid had always been a control freak. New car? I asked, buckling up. It looks expensive. A company car, she said shortly, pulling onto the road. The company gave it to all the department heads last quarter. So, a promotion? Congratulations. Yeah, thanks. She gave me a strange look. You know, Mom, I've been thinking. Maybe you should consider moving into a senior center. There's a new apartment in Pine Hills, very comfortable. This is it, I thought. Here we go. I feel great in my home, I replied firmly. And I plan to stay there as long as I can live on my own. Of course you're doing fine now. Enid's voice was soft but insistent. But you have to think about the future. It's a big house. It needs constant upkeep. And Pine Hills has medical staff, Activities for people your age, a community my age. I could feel the irritation building. You mean other old people who can be kept out of sight so they don't bother the busy kids? Mother, you're being unfair. Enid gripped the steering wheel tighter. I'm thinking of your welfare, your safety. We drove down the empty highway. Enid drove exactly at the speed limit, never faster, never slower, always by the book. What about Thornton? I asked suddenly. He likes coming to the house where he grew up with his grandfather. Thornton will be graduating soon, starting his career. He won't have time for these sentimental visits. You can't know that for sure, I countered. Some things are more important than a career. Like music. There was a sneer in her voice. Mom, the world has changed. You don't have the luxury of spending time on hobbies if you want to get ahead. We stopped talking. I stared out the window at the Princeton suburbs running by, gradually changing to a more urban landscape as we approached Newark. Anyway, Enid spoke again a few minutes later. Think about it while you're in Italy. I can arrange to view the apartment when you get back. Thank you for your concern, I replied in a neutral tone, but I don't plan to move. Enid sighed, but didn't insist. Instead, she changed the subject abruptly. Did you bring your blood pressure pills and your insurance? Yes, I have everything with me. I was surprised at this show of concern. Good, and don't forget to call. I can be in touch anytime. We were approaching Newark Airport. Enid deftly maneuvered through the traffic, heading toward the international terminal. Would you like me to walk you to the check-in desk? She offered, pulling over to the curb. No need. I unbuckled my seatbelt. You have a meeting. I don't want you to be late. Enid unloaded my suitcase and gave me a sudden hug, a gesture we'd rarely exchanged in recent years. Have a safe trip, Mom, she said with a smile. Enjoy Italy. I watched her get into the car and drive away, feeling a strange mix of feelings. Something was definitely wrong, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Maybe I really am becoming an imaginative old woman. With these thoughts, I turned toward the terminal. 3 hours before the flight was enough time to go through the formalities and get ready for the long flight. I didn't realize that those 3 hours would completely change my life. The terminal of Newark Airport met me with the usual bustle. People with suitcases were rushing in different directions. Some were emotionally saying goodbye. Some were impatiently looking at the scoreboard. I involuntarily slowed my step, watching this flow of people. At my age, there was no need to hurry. I had arrived 3 hours before the flight anyway, so I had more than enough time. I headed toward my airline's check-in counter, eyeing the people around me with mild curiosity. A young couple, clearly on their honeymoon, couldn't take their eyes off each other even for a second. A family with 2 restless children, whose mother looked exhausted even before the flight started. A businessman in a perfectly ironed suit immersed in his laptop. They were all part of this strange temporary community of travelers, united only by their shared space and their imminent flight to different corners of the world. There was virtually no line at the check-in counter, one of the advantages of arriving well before the flight. I handed my passport and e-ticket printout to a young woman in a strict uniform. Good morning, she smiled. Are you flying to Rome? Yes, I answered. The flight leaves at 11. She started checking something on the computer and her face frowned slightly. Ms. Hilliard, she said after a pause, may I ask, have you made any changes to your reservation recently? No, I felt my insides tense up. There have been no changes. She continued to stare at the monitor with a puzzled expression. That's odd. According to our system, there was a passenger change at 16:30 yesterday. The ticket was reissued in the name of Sybil Preston. What? I felt the blood drain from my face. There must be some mistake. I didn't make any changes. The changes were made through your personal account on the airline's website, she explained. Using your username and password, Sybil Preston, Whitney's mother, Enid's mother-in-law, the same one who had recently returned from a cruise. Suddenly, all the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in a frightening pattern. It's a mistake, I said firmly. I didn't reissue my ticket. The employee looked worried. I'm afraid the system clearly states that the changes were confirmed through your email. You should have received a notification. I pulled out my phone and opened my mail. Indeed, there was an unread email from the airline confirming the change in passenger details. But I'd never given Enid access to my email. although perhaps I'd been too careless in leaving my laptop open when she came to visit. This is some kind of misunderstanding, I said, trying to speak calmly. The ticket was paid for with my credit card. I didn't authorize anyone to change the passenger's information. The employee seemed genuinely sympathetic. I understand your situation, Ms. Hilliard. Unfortunately, according to airline policy, we cannot reverse such a change on the day of departure. You'll need to contact our service center and explain the situation. There may be fraud involved. That's when my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I'm sorry, I said to the employee and stepped aside to answer it. Miss Hilliard? The voice on the phone was businesslike and official. This is Patrick Morrison from the security department at First National Bank of Princeton. We've detected suspicious activity in your account. Did you make a transfer of $135,000 today? I felt my legs give out and I hurried to the nearest seat. No, I answered in a weak voice. I hadn't made any transfers. The transaction was made through online banking about 40 minutes ago, the bank employee continued. The recipient is Thornton Preston. My grandson? It didn't make sense. Thornton would never. It's not me, I said firmly. Block the transfer immediately. Unfortunately, the funds have already left your account, Morrison replied. We can initiate a refund procedure, but to do that, you need to visit the bank branch in person with documents and write a statement about the unauthorized transaction. I'll be there in an hour, I said, and disconnected. The world around me seemed to float. The ticket had been reissued to Enid's mother-in-law, the money had been transferred to Thornton's account, and it all happened just when I was supposed to be gone for 2 weeks. There's no such thing as coincidence. I went back to the front desk. I'm sorry, but I can't fly today, I told the desk clerk. I had an emergency. She nodded understandingly. Your suitcase hasn't been checked in yet, so just take it with you. If you want to rebook your flight later, call our service center. I thanked her and headed out of the terminal, rolling my suitcase behind me. My thoughts raced frantically through my head. Enid. Enid had planned this whole thing. That's why she was so insistent on driving me to the airport. That's why she was suddenly talking about moving into a nursing home. She was counting on me discovering the missing ticket and money while I was already in Italy, helpless, far from home, without resources. I got a cab and gave her the address of the bank. On the way, I tried to calm my breathing and get my thoughts in order. You can't panic. You have to be methodical. Enid had expected her plan to work perfectly, but she hadn't realized that I'd arrived at the airport long before my flight and had time to spot the switch. At the bank, I was admitted without a line when I explained the situation. The gray-haired manager personally escorted me to his office. Ms. Hilliard, we apologize for what happened, he said. We have already started the investigation procedure. Unfortunately, unless the recipient returns the funds voluntarily, the refund process may take some time. I understand, I nodded. Is there any way to find out what device the transfer was made from? Our specialists are already working on it, the manager answered. Preliminarily, I can say that the login was made from a new device, which was not used to access your account before. And the system did not block such a login? I was surprised. The correct confirmation code sent to your phone number was entered, he explained. But I didn't receive any code. Suddenly, I remembered Enid taking my phone in the morning while I was locking the house. Mom, you got a message from the bank, some kind of code. Probably an automatic mailing, she said then. I brushed it off without giving it much thought. Here's how she did it. After filling out the necessary paperwork at the bank, I walked outside and paused for a moment, not knowing what to do next. Should I go straight to Enid's house, or should I gather my thoughts first? And then I remembered someone who might be able to help. Alden Havisham was a colleague of Montgomery's and a good acquaintance of mine for many years. A law professor who had retired about 10 years ago, but who continued to advise on legal matters. He had helped Montgomery and I draft our wills and knew all of our cases. I dialed his number, hoping he hadn't changed in recent years. Alden Havisham speaking, came a familiar velvet voice. Alden, this is Catherine Hilliard, I said. I really need your help. It's about family matters. Catherine, there was genuine surprise in his voice. What a pleasant surprise. Of course, I'll help in any way I can. Would you like to come to my house? If it's possible, I breathed out with relief. Right away. I'm waiting for you, he said simply. Alden lived in a small but elegant house near the campus. The cab took me there in 20 minutes. He met me at the door, a tall, lean man with a neat white beard and clear blue eyes. Despite his 78 years, he kept his posture straight and his mind sharp. Catherine. He shook my hand warmly. Come in. I was just making tea. We went into his office, a cozy room filled with bookcases. Alden poured tea into porcelain cups and listened attentively to my story of what had happened, without interrupting. What your daughter did was very rash, he said when I finished. This isn't just a family conflict, Catherine. There are clearly elements of fraud here that could have serious legal consequences for Enid. I don't want to sue her, I shook my head. She is my daughter after all. But I have to protect myself. Alden drummed his fingers on the table thoughtfully. I remember Montgomery telling me about some land just before he got sick. Just a moment. He rose and walked over to an old-fashioned filing cabinet in the corner of the office. I keep copies of important documents of my friends, he explained, going through the folders. Montgomery insisted on it. Oh, here it is. Alden pulled out a thin folder and returned to the desk. This could be your bargaining chip, Catherine. A plot of land on the outskirts of Princeton, about 3 acres. Montgomery bought it shortly before his death and deeded it solely to you, not as joint property. There is no mention of the property in the will. Apparently, your husband wanted only you to know about it. I didn't know anything about the property, I admitted, looking at the documents. Montgomery said he wanted to surprise you. Alden smiled softly. He was planning to build a summer house where you could spend time outdoors after you retired. But then his illness started, and I guess he didn't have time to tell you. I felt tears coming to my eyes. Even 5 years after Montgomery's death, there were things that reminded me of his love and care. And where is this lot located? I asked, trying to keep my composure. Alden pointed to the map. Right here, near the new Willow Grove development. The land there has gone up in value in recent years, especially since they announced the construction of a new shopping center nearby. I suddenly remembered my conversation with Thornton. His mention that Enid and Whitney had discussed something about real estate appraisals, and Beatrice saying she'd seen Enid with some man appraising my house. Alden, I said slowly, is it possible that Enid knew about this property, or thought it was hers by inheritance from Montgomery? Alden hesitated a moment. Perhaps Montgomery had mentioned the purchase of the plot but had not specified the details of the deed. In that case, Enid might have mistakenly believed that the plot was part of the inheritance estate. Suddenly, it all made sense. Willow Grove, I muttered. Enid had mentioned a few months ago that she and Whitney were thinking of building a new house in that neighborhood, but she said they couldn't find a suitable lot yet. They might have found it. Alden raised an eyebrow. They just didn't know it was yours and not part of the inheritance. I pulled out my phone and did a quick Google. Willow Grove, real estate developer. The first link led to the website of Princeton Homes, a cottage development company. Are they still selling lots in that neighborhood? Alden asked, watching me. No, I answered, looking at the information. All the plots in the village have been sold, but they are interested in acquiring adjacent land for expansion. I found a contact number for the developer and didn't hesitate to dial it. Princeton Homes, how can I help you? A pleasant female voice answered. Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Hilliard. I own a parcel of land adjacent to your Willow Grove Township and would like to know if you are interested in purchasing it. One moment, Ms. Hilliard. I'll connect you with our land acquisition manager. After a short wait, an energetic male voice answered the phone. Brandon Collins, development manager for Princeton Homes. Ms. Hilliard, you mentioned the property near Willow Grove? That's correct, I confirmed, looking at the deed. 3 acres north of your current property. Oh, he sounded excited. That's the property. We're really interested in acquiring it. In fact, we've already been in preliminary negotiations. With whom, may I ask? I interrupted, already guessing the answer. Ms. Enid Preston, he replied. She introduced herself as the owner of the property and, Mr. Collins, I said firmly. Miss Preston is not the owner of the property. The only legal owner is me, Catherine Hilliard. and I have all the documents to prove it. There was a pause on the other end of the line. You understand, Brandon Collins finally said. This is a somewhat awkward situation. Ms. Preston said she inherited the property from her father, but the paperwork hasn't been finalized yet. I'm afraid Miss Preston has misled you, I said. And if you're still interested in buying the property, I'd be willing to discuss terms. Right away. Alden nodded approvingly, watching me. Of course we're interested, Collins answered hastily. If you can provide the documents, I can send you the scans right now and meet you in person during the day to sign the preliminary agreement. We agreed to meet in 3 hours at the Princeton Homes office. I disconnected the phone and looked at Alden. Are you sure you want to sell the property? He asked. Perhaps Montgomery wanted you to keep it. Montgomery wanted me to be happy, I replied. And now I need a way to protect myself from my own daughter, who tried to leave me with no money in a foreign country. Alden nodded. I'll go with you to the meeting to oversee the legal aspects of the deal. Thank you. I thanked him sincerely. In the meantime, I think I should call a cab to Enid's house. Are you sure you want to meet her now? Alden asked worriedly. Maybe I should wait until the first wave of emotion had subsided. No, I answered firmly. She was counting on me being on the plane, helpless and unaware of her machinations. I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized her plan had failed. I hailed a cab, and 20 minutes later we were pulling up to Enid's house, a large 2-story building in an upscale suburb of Princeton. Immaculate lawn, perfectly trimmed bushes, just like a picture from a country magazine. I rang the doorbell. To my surprise, Whitney opened the door. Usually he was at work at this time. Catherine? He looked stunned. What are you? Aren't you supposed to be on the plane? Apparently there was a little mix-up with the tickets, I answered dryly. Is Enid home? Yes, he stammered. Come on in, I'll go get her. I stepped into the spacious hallway and heard Enid's voice from the back of the house. Whitney, who's there? It's your mother, he answered. There was a brief pause, and then I heard quick footsteps. Enid appeared in the living room doorway, frozen, wide-eyed. Mom? Her voice trembled. What are you doing here? Your flight. It was rebooked under Sybil Preston's name. I finished it for her. Amazing coincidence, don't you think? Enid turned pale, but quickly pulled herself together. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? I stepped into the living room. What about the $135,000 that mysteriously transferred from my account to Thornton's this morning? You don't know anything either? Whitney shifted his gaze from me to his wife, obviously trying to figure out what was going on. Enid, what does she mean? Enid ignored his question, keeping her eyes on me. What are you going to do? She asked tensely. Oh, I've already done something, I replied, feeling strangely calm. I just negotiated the sale of the Willow Grove property to Princeton Homes, the very lot on which you were planning to build your new house. Now Whitney's pale too. Catherine, you can't. This lot belongs to me, I said. It belongs to me exclusively. Montgomery deeded it in my name, not as part of the community estate. It was never part of the estate. But Dad said, Enid started. I guess you didn't listen or didn't want to understand, I interrupted her. Like so many other things. We stood opposite each other, mother and daughter, 2 women bound by blood, but separated by a chasm of misunderstanding and resentment. In that moment, I felt not so much anger as a deep, endless weariness. Why, Enid? I asked quietly. Why did you have to steal my money and ruin my long-awaited trip? Enid clenched her fists, the stubborn expression on her face that I knew so well from her childhood. You've always thought only of yourself, she said bitterly. You didn't care about my needs, my plans. You wanted to spend your money on this stupid trip when Thornton needs money for his master's program. And you refused to even discuss moving into a nursing home when you know full well you're already struggling to live alone. I just, hastened the inevitable. Justifying the theft by caring? I shook my head. You transfer money to Thornton's account without his knowledge. You cheat the developer by pretending to own the lot. You send your elderly mother to another country without money or a return ticket. All out of concern? Enid was silent, avoiding my gaze. Whitney shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. Catherine, he finally spoke. I'm sure we can talk about this. About the property, I didn't realize it was in your name, Enid said. Enid says a lot of things, I said sharply. But the truth is that in an hour I'm signing a preliminary agreement to sell the lot. And no house will be built there, at least not yours. Enid looked up at me, her eyes full of anger and despair. You can't do this to us. We've already paid the architect in advance, ordered the design. I can, I said simply. And I'm doing it right now. I turned around and headed for the exit, feeling a strange mixture of bitterness and release growing inside me. On the doorstep, I turned around. One more thing, Enid. I've already contacted the bank. The money will be returned to my account. With any luck, Thornton won't even know what you tried to do in his name. I walked out of the house without looking back and got into the cab waiting for me. Where are we going? The driver asked. To the Princeton Homes office, I said. I had an important appointment. The cab started. I looked at the houses floating by and thought that my Italy would have to wait. Right now, I had more important things to do. To protect what was rightfully mine from the man I'd once given life to. The tentative contract with Princeton Homes was signed quickly and smoothly. Brandon Collins, at first confused by the situation, quickly switched into business mode when he realized I was the rightful owner of the property and was determined. Alden Havisham, as promised, was present at the signing, scrutinizing every clause of the document. The final agreement will be ready in a week, Collins said, shaking my hand, and we will transfer the deposit to your account within 2 working days. Thank you for your promptness, I replied. It was starting to get dark when we left the office. Alden offered me a ride home. You're doing well, Catherine, he said as we got into his old-fashioned Volvo. But you need to rest. It's been a long day. I nodded, suddenly feeling tired. The emotional strain, the frustration, the anger. It was as draining as the physical exertion. Thanks for your help, Alden, I said. I don't know what I would have done without you. That's what friends are for. He smiled softly. Montgomery would be proud of you. You acted decisively and fairly. We drove a few blocks in friendly silence when my phone rang. Thornton's name popped up on the screen. Grandma! His voice sounded excited. I just got off the phone with my mom. She's hysterical. What happened? I sighed. Of course, Enid had called her son, probably gave her side of the story. Thornton, the situation is, complicated, I began cautiously. Your mother hasn't been very nice to me. She told me that you sold the lot we were going to build a house on. He sounded puzzled. And that you refused to move to a safer place. Grandma, I don't understand what's going on. Thornton, let's meet and talk in person, I suggested. This is not a phone conversation. There was a pause. Actually, I'm on my way to your place, he admitted. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I asked Alden to drive me home and thanked him again for his help. He promised to be in touch if I needed legal advice. When I entered the house, it looked exactly as I'd left it that morning. It was as if nothing had happened, even though my life had been turned upside down in one day. I made coffee and sat in the chair by the window, gathering my thoughts before talking to my grandson. Thornton arrived even earlier than he'd promised. I saw his car parked in front of the house and went to open the door. He looked worried, a crease between his eyebrows. At that moment, he looked uncannily like his grandfather. Grandma, he hugged me. What's wrong? I led him into the kitchen and poured coffee. Then, calmly, without emotion, I told him about the events of the day. The ticket swap, the withdrawal of money from my account, the plot of land that Enid thought was hers. Thornton listened without interrupting, only his face grew more and more tense. I can't believe Mom would do something like that, he said at last. To reissue your ticket, to leave you with no money in a foreign country. It's crazy. I was shocked, too, I admitted. I knew we had a complicated relationship, but I never thought it would come to this. Grandma, about the money. Thornton was visibly nervous. Mom said the money was for my schooling. To pay for my master's program at Stanford. I just got the invitation yesterday, but I haven't talked to you about it yet. Congratulations, I said sincerely. But Thornton, if you just asked for help, of course I would have. You didn't have to make a big show of it. I didn't, he exclaimed hotly. I didn't even know what she was planning. She called today and said that you'd agreed to help pay for it, but that the money would be in my account, not theirs. I thought, he hesitated. I thought it was weird, but I figured you and Mom had finally hit it off. I shook my head. We didn't discuss it. Enid went behind my back. Thornton lowered his eyes. I'm so ashamed. I'll get that money back, of course. The bank is already in the process of returning it. I put my hand on his shoulder. Thornton, I don't want you to get between me and your mother. This is our conflict. But I'm part of the family, he objected, and I can't just stand by. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Thornton and I looked at each other. Are you expecting someone? He asked. No, I stood up, but I could guess who it was. I opened the door. Enid and Whitney were standing on the doorstep. My daughter looked like she'd been crying. Her eyes were red, her makeup smeared. Whitney held her hand, his face serious and tense. Mom, Enid's voice trembled. We need to talk. I stepped back silently, letting them into the house. Enid noticed Thornton's jacket on the coat rack and her eyes widened. Thornton's here? She walked quickly into the living room, where her son was just rising from his chair. Mom? Dad? What are you doing here? I could ask the same of you, Enid replied sharply. I've called you several times. I've been busy. Thornton crossed his arms across his chest. And by the way, I know about your plans for Grandma's money. Then you've already turned him against me, haven't you? I just told him the facts, I said calmly. About how you tried to send me to Italy without a return ticket or money. Whitney stepped forward. Look, let's all calm down and talk about this situation like adults. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I raised an eyebrow. Whitney, your wife withdrew all my savings without my knowledge. That's not a misunderstanding. That's theft. Technically, it was a transfer to Thornton's account. Whitney held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. The money's not gone, it's in the family. Not in my family, I countered. It's in yours. Without my consent. God, Mom, you're always so dramatic, Enid exclaimed. We just wanted to help you make the right choice. What choice? I could feel the irritation building. Losing my money and my house? Enid took a deep breath, clearly trying to keep her emotions in check. We wanted you to move to Pine Hills. They'll take care of you there. You can't live alone in that big house anymore. What makes you think I can't? I straightened up. I'm doing just fine. Yeah? Enid snorted. Who forgot to turn off the stove last week? My neighbor Henderson called me in a panic because she smelled gas coming from your house. I frowned. I didn't forget to turn off the stove. That's absurd. See? Enid turned to Whitney. She doesn't even remember. Her memory is deteriorating, but she refuses to admit it. Now I was really angry. My memory is perfectly fine, Enid. I remember every book I taught students 40 years ago. I can quote entire pages from Jane Eyre and Middlemarch. Don't you dare talk about my memory. Your long-term memory is fine, Enid agreed. Short-term memory is a problem. You forget where you put things. You get confused about the days of the week. It happens to everyone. I resented it. Certainly not a reason to declare me incompetent. Thornton, who had been silently listening to our argument, suddenly spoke up. Wait, Mother. What do you mean, incapacitated? Enid was silent, avoiding her son's gaze. Whitney coughed. We consulted a lawyer about the possibility of a guardianship for Grandma. In her best interest, of course. There was silence in the room. I felt a chill run down my spine. They were planning to incapacitate me. Take away not only the money, but the right to make decisions about my own life. You're crazy, Thornton said quietly. Grandmother has full legal capacity. Any court will confirm that. You don't live with her, Enid objected. You don't see her gradually change. I laughed, but without mirth. It's ironic. When you were a teenager, you used to complain that I was too strict and demanding. Now I'm suddenly a helpless old woman, unable to take care of myself. Everyone changes, Mother. Enid's eyes filled with tears. Even you. Yes, everyone ages, I agreed. But there's a big difference between aging and incapacity. And my doctor will tell you that I'm perfectly fine and in great shape for my age. Doctors are wrong, Enid said stubbornly. Whitney tried to lighten the atmosphere. Let's all calm down. Enid, maybe we really did rush into these plans. Catherine seems quite put together. Thanks for the compliment, Whitney, I replied sarcastically. I didn't mean it like that, he blushed. It's just, maybe we can find a compromise? Catherine stays in her house, but we hire an assistant to come once a day? I don't need supervision, I said firmly. See? Enid splashed her hands. She's always like that. Stubborn, uncooperative, always knows best. What do you suggest? I countered. That I agree with you on everything? Even when you try to steal my money and take away my autonomy? I was trying to protect you, screamed Enid. To protect you from your own stubbornness. You've always been like that. Cold, rational, unable to see beyond your books and lectures. Even when I was a child, you were never really there for me. Always with a book, always with work, always with your father, but never with me. This is it, I thought. At last, we're getting to the point. Enid, I said softly but firmly. I loved you in the best way I could. Maybe I wasn't the perfect mother. Maybe I was too immersed in my work. But I never stopped caring about you. Care? She chuckled bitterly. Criticism and high expectations are what I got from you. Only my father ever really loved me. Montgomery spoiled you, I said. I was trying to prepare you for real life. Maybe I was too strict, but that doesn't excuse what you did today. Thornton looked at us with pain in his eyes. Whitney looked uncomfortable, clearly regretting being dragged into this conflict. You sold the lot just to spite me, Enid accused. You knew how important it was for us to build a house there, and you sold it anyway. I sold the lot because it was mine, I replied calmly. And because you and Whitney were trying to appropriate it without any right to do so. Dad wanted us to build a house there, Enid insisted. No, I shook my head. Montgomery wanted to build a house there for me and him. He put the lot in my name because it was his gift to me. Not you, Enid. Me. Enid turned away, her shoulders shaking. Whitney put his arm around her, giving me a reproachful look. Catherine, you could have been gentler. Enid just wanted you to be safe. Did she? I raised an eyebrow. Sending an elderly man with no money and no return ticket to a foreign country is a safety concern? We would have transferred the money, Whitney said quickly. As soon as you would have agreed to move to Pine Hills, it was leverage. Blackmail, I corrected. As always, you only see the worst in people. Enid turned to me, her face contorted with anger and pain. Even in her own daughter. No, Enid, I sighed. I'm just seeing reality. And the reality is this. You tried to manipulate me to get what you want, like you've been doing your whole life. I'm not going to listen to this anymore. Enid grabbed her bag. Come on, Whitney. We've tried to be nice, but she just won't listen. Thornton, are you coming with us? Thornton looked like he was being torn apart. He looked from his mother to me. Stay for a while. Grandmother and I have something else we need to talk about. Enid's face froze. Whatever you want, but think carefully about which side you're on. There are no sides, Mother, Thornton said tiredly. There's only a family that's falling apart. Family? Enid grinned bitterly. Ask your grandmother what she thinks of family. Books and work were always more important to her. With these words, she left the living room. Whitney shrugged guiltily and followed her. A moment later, the front door slammed. Thornton and I were alone in the suddenly empty room. I felt devastated, as if I'd just been through a serious illness. Grandmother, Thornton said quietly, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize for your mother. I smiled weakly. You are not responsible for her actions. But I could have noticed. Warned? No, I shook my head. Enid had always been secretive when it came to her plans, even as a child. Thornton sat down next to me on the couch. What happens now? To you? To us? I was silent for a long time, staring out the window at the darkening sky. What will happen now? How do you go on with your life, knowing that your only daughter was willing to do this to you? I don't know, Thornton, I answered honestly. Something broke today. Something that probably can't be fixed. You don't want to talk to your mom anymore? There was concern in his eyes. Not right now, I sighed. I need time. She probably does too. What about me? He asked quietly. With you, of course. I took his hand. It's not your fault, Thornton. And I don't want you to feel like a traitor when you talk to me. He nodded, but there was still doubt in his eyes. You know, he said after a pause, Mom always talked about how hard she had it with you when you were a kid. But when I was growing up, you were the only one who really listened to me. Who didn't tell me music was a waste of time? Who didn't insist that I was always the best? It's funny, I grinned bitterly. When Enid was little, I was too demanding. With you, on the other hand, I was too soft. Maybe you just learned, Thornton suggested. People change, become wiser. I'd like to believe that. I looked at the picture of Montgomery on the mantelpiece. Your grandfather always said I needed to be more tolerant. But some things can't be learned from books. Thornton squeezed my hand. What are you going to do with the money from the sale of the allotment? I don't know, I shrugged. Maybe I'll go to Italy after all. Or, I stopped a sudden idea coming into my head. Or, Thornton encouraged me, or help my talented grandson pay for his master's program at Stanford, I smiled. If he's willing to accept that help, of course. Grandma, Thornton blushed. I can't. After everything that's happened. It's my money, I said firmly. And I decide how to spend it. If your mother really cared about your education and not just using it as an excuse, she should be pleased. She'll be furious, Thornton shook his head. She'll think you're trying to win me over to your side? Maybe, I sighed. But I'm not. I just want to help you without manipulation or conditions. We sat in silence, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts. It was finally dark outside the window, and I turned on the desk lamp, casting a warm yellow light across the room. You know what the saddest thing is? I finally said. What Enid never realized. I wanted the best for her. Maybe my methods were wrong, but my intentions were the most sincere. I know, Thornton answered quietly. And I think deep down inside she knows it too. I didn't argue, though I doubted it. Some wounds are too deep to ever truly heal. And today there was a crack between me and my daughter that I felt would never heal. I have to go, Thornton stood up. My parents will be worried. I nodded. Of course. Thanks for listening. I'll call tomorrow. He hugged me. And Grandma, take care of yourself, okay? I will. I walked him to the door. When Thornton's car was around the corner, I went back into the living room and sank into a chair. The paperwork for the trip to Italy was on the table, the trip that was supposed to start today. I picked up my passport and thoughtfully flipped through its blank pages, not yet stamped by Italian customs. Perhaps I would make this trip after all. But not today and not tomorrow. First, I had to deal with what was left of my family after I stopped being a mother to my only daughter. It had been a week since the day my life had been turned upside down. 7 days filled with silence and loneliness that I spent going through photos, reading old letters, and trying to figure out at what point everything went wrong. When exactly had my relationship with Enid become such that she decided that deception and manipulation were the only way to get what she wanted from me? I sat in my office sorting through papers. Some of it I'd set aside for shredding. Old bills, unneeded receipts, expired insurance policies. The other part I sorted neatly into folders. Everything about the house, finances, wills. I wanted my affairs in perfect order, no matter what happened next. The morning light flooded the room, illuminating the dust specks dancing in the air. Montgomery loved this time of day. Morning is the fairest time of day, he used to say. You can see everything so clearly. I had laughed then, calling it a mathematical superstition, but now I understood what he meant. In the morning, before the hustle and bustle of the day clouds the mind, thoughts do flow more clearly. I thought of Enid, about the little serious girl with pigtails who always wanted to do everything right, of the teenager who rebelled against my rules and found comfort in the arms of an overly soft father, about the young woman who strove to build a career and a family according to her own ideas of perfection. And finally, about the present day Enid, a 45-year-old woman willing to go out of her way to deceive her own mother to get what she thought was right. Maybe she and I were too much alike, both stubborn, principled, sure we were right. Maybe that's why we never really understood each other. The doorbell rang, interrupting my musings. I rose from my chair, wincing at the slight pain in my knees. Another reminder of my age. Thornton stood on the doorstep with a small gym bag over his shoulder and a hesitant smile. Hi, Grandma, he said. May I come in? Sure. I stepped back, letting him in. Is something wrong? Thornton shook his head. No, just wanted to see you. How are you? I'm doing okay. I led him into the kitchen. Tea? Coffee? Coffee, please. He sat down at the table, putting his bag next to him. Yeah, my mom doesn't know I'm here. I put the coffee maker on. Did you two have a fight? Not really, Thornton sighed. It's just that the atmosphere at home is tense. My parents are always whispering, shutting up when I come in. Mom looks like she hasn't slept in days. Dad tiptoes around her. I'm sorry you're going through this, I said sincerely. It's not your fault, Thornton replied firmly. I talked to the bank. The money has already been returned to your account. I nodded. Thank you. Although it should have been your mother, not you. Grandma, I brought you something. He opened the bag and took out a thick envelope. It's a check for the amount of money my mother deposited into my account. I want to return this money to you personally, and also, he hesitated. I want to apologize for not seeing what was going on. I should have known. I took the envelope but put it back on the table without opening it. Thornton, it's not your fault. And this money, I'd really like to help you go to Stanford. I can't accept them. He shook his head. Not after everything that's happened. I poured the coffee into cups and sat down across from him. And I can't take it back. You're my grandson, and I want to support your education. No manipulation, no deception. Just a grandmother's gift to her favorite grandson. Thornton looked at me with his gray eyes, Montgomery eyes, and I saw in them the same inner struggle I'd often seen in my husband. I'll think about it, he said at last. Good. I sipped my coffee. How's your music? Are you still in the jazz band? His face brightened. Yes, we have a gig in 2 weeks. We've prepared some new compositions, including my arrangement of Autumn Leaves. I'd love to hear it, I said. Really? He looked surprised and delighted. I could leave you an invitation. The concert is at the University Hall at 7 o'clock at night. I'll definitely come, I smiled. We talked about music, about his plans for graduate school, about the books he had recently read on my recommendation. Gradually, the tension left his shoulders, and I was glad to see that at least one family member I still had a normal relationship with. Grandma, Thornton said suddenly as we finished our second cup of coffee, what about your trip to Italy? Are you still planning to go? I sighed. I don't know. The mood for traveling is ruined, to be honest. But you've been dreaming about it for so long, he frowned. You can't let what happened rob you of that. You're probably right, I wondered. I could rebook the tickets, but going alone, it seemed too dreary now. Thornton was silent for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts, and then he said, What if I went with you? I looked at him in surprise. You? To Italy? Why not? He shrugged his shoulders. I'm on vacation until the beginning of the next semester. I've always wanted to see Rome and Florence. I think a change of scenery would be good for both of us. I felt a warmth rise in my chest. The thought of sharing my journey with my grandson suddenly seemed very appealing, not just to fulfill a long-held dream, but to create new memories, a new bond. Are you serious? I asked. What would your mother say? Thornton's face became serious. I'm a grown man, Grandma. I'm 21 years old. I can decide where I want to go and with whom. She'll think I've turned you against her. I shook my head. That would only make things worse. Or maybe it would give her time to think, Thornton argued. Mom's not a bad person, Grandma. She's just confused. Did something stupid, thinking she was doing the right thing. I know, I agreed quietly. She'd always been like that, believing that the end justifies the means if the end, in her opinion, is honorable. So, what about Italy? Thornton smiled. Imagine, the Colosseum, the Vatican, the Uffizi, the canals of Venice. And, of course, Italian cuisine. I laughed. You just want to eat real pasta and gelato. Who doesn't? He winked. Come on, Grandma, let's do it. You deserve this trip. I looked at his young, enthusiastic face and felt my doubts recede. Maybe this was exactly what we both needed. A trip that would help heal the wounds and create new, brighter memories. Okay, I decided. Let's go together. Thornton glowed. Great. When do we start planning? Right now. I stood up. I still had all the brochures and guidebooks. I'll just need to rebook the tickets and hotels. We spent the next few hours leaning over maps and guidebooks, plotting our itinerary, and discussing the places we wanted to visit. I noticed Thornton making notes about jazz clubs and music venues in the cities we plan to visit. I love that you think about music even when you're traveling, I said with a smile. Music is part of culture, he replied. I want to hear what Italy sounds like. At that moment, I saw him not only as a grandson, but as an individual in his own right, with his own interests and view of the world. Montgomery would have been so proud. As the sun began to slip toward the horizon, Thornton started for home. I have to go. My parents will be worried. Of course! I walked him to the door. Thornton, are you sure you want to come with me? It might put a strain on your relationship with your mother. He looked at me seriously. I love Mom, Grandma, but what she did was wrong, and I'm not going to let her rob you of this trip or deprive me of the opportunity to spend time with my grandmother in Italy. I hugged him, feeling unexpected relief. Maybe not all was lost in my life. After Thornton left, I returned to my office. On the desk was a folder with the paperwork for the sale of the land parcel. Brandon Collins at Princeton Homes had been true to his word. The deal had been finalized as quickly as possible, and the money had already been deposited into my account. The amount was impressive, much more than I expected. Enough to pay not only for a trip to Italy for Thornton and me, but also for his Stanford tuition. I pulled out my checkbook and, after a moment's deliberation, wrote a check for half the amount I'd received from the sale of the property. Payee Enid Preston. I don't know what exactly drove me to this decision. Maybe it was the memory of the little girl with pigtails who once held my hand tightly. Or maybe Thornton's words that his mother wasn't a bad person, just confused. Or just the realization that even after everything that had happened, she was still my daughter. I found the envelope and put the check in it, adding no note or explanation. Some things don't need words. The gesture wasn't a plea for forgiveness or an attempt to make amends, either on her part or mine. It was simply an acknowledgement that despite all the disagreements and pain we had caused each other, we were still bound together by invisible threads of familial bonds that could never be completely severed. I addressed the envelope and set it aside to mail tomorrow. Then I went back to planning our trip with Thornton. Florence, Rome, Venice, places Montgomery and I had dreamed of for so long. Now I would see them with our grandson, a young man so much like his grandfather in the traits I had always valued most: curiosity, kindness, the ability to see the beauty in music and math at the same time. That evening I was sitting in the living room with a book when the phone rang, Alden Havisham's number. Catherine, I hope I didn't wake you. His voice sounded warm and concerned. No, I hadn't gone to bed yet, I answered. Is something the matter? Nothing urgent. I just wanted to see how you were coping after all the events. Better than you'd expect, I smiled, though he couldn't see it. In fact, I decided to take that trip to Italy after all, with my grandson. Excellent! There was genuine approval in his voice. That's exactly what you need. And how are things with your daughter? We haven't spoken since that day, I sighed. But I wrote her a check for half of the sale of the property. That's very generous of you, Alden said, especially under the circumstances. It's not generous, I countered. It's more like an acknowledgement of reality. Enid is my daughter no matter what. And somehow we have to find a way to exist in this world without hurting each other more. A wise decision, Alden approved. Montgomery would be proud of you. After the conversation, I sat at the window for a long time, staring out at the starry sky. Thoughts of the journey ahead mingled with memories of the past and thoughts of the future. I didn't know how my relationship with Enid would turn out, whether we would ever bridge the gap or just learn to live with her existence. But I knew one thing. Life goes on, even when it feels like the world is falling apart. In the morning, I went to the post office. The envelope with the check for Enid was in my bag, a reminder that even the most complicated relationships deserve, if not forgiveness, at least understanding. On the way back, I stopped by a travel agency to rebook tickets and hotels for my trip with Thornton. A young female employee enthusiastically helped me make all the necessary changes. Traveling with your grandson is wonderful, she said as she completed the paperwork. You will have wonderful memories. Yes, I agreed. I'm sure it will. As I left the agency with my new tickets and brochures, I paused for a moment, my face in the spring sunshine. At 72, life seemed both shorter and infinitely longer than I could have imagined in my youth. Decades of joys and losses behind me, the unknown ahead, but still full of possibilities. I didn't know if Enid would receive my check or what she would think of the gesture. I didn't know if I would ever fully understand her or she me. But I did know that in 2 weeks, Thornton and I would be looking at the Colosseum, walking around St. Mark's Square, eating gelato in little cafes, and listening to Italian opera under the stars. And that was enough. I walked home at a leisurely pace, thinking about how strange life can be sometimes. Betrayal can lead to new beginnings, loss to unexpected gains. At 72, I was about to embark on the trip I dreamed of all my life, not alone as I'd planned, but with a grandson who would carry on his grandfather's best traits. Montgomery always said that life is a continuous function with many variables. You can't predict all its twists and turns, but you can find beauty in even the most complex equations. Now, walking down the sun-drenched streets of Princeton with tickets to Italy in my bag, I realized how right he was.